the other day when I was playing, and they fucking gave me a fucking a strike on YouTube and fucking made it where I couldn't stream for fucking 7 days. Yeah, bro, but I gained almost 50 fucking 50 new subscribers off of it. So and they're still there. I've only had one unsubscribe. I had 51 and I had one unsubscribe. So yeah, we'll take it. Yeah, because I will be honest and say that I kind of was showing the game a little bit on my stream here and there, and that's what got me my. It worked for like an hour and a half. Hmm. Bro, I had like 586 viewers at one point in time. I was like, what, son? This is fucking weird. You look at all these people. Don't be hating on me, bro. So you need a what? Do what? Where'd you go? Punk Beach?
Huh?
Oh, I thought you left. Or I thought you went somewhere.
No, I'm still here. I am still here.
Good. Whoa, guy.
Whoa, well.
Or did you at least watch some of the Arizona State game while you were here?
I'm loving this live betting on DraftKings.
With so many options during the game, it feels like I'm calling the plays. Hi-yo! That's a touchdown! I told you. See, guys, I get the W. You know why? Because I chose right, but not this guy. I work hard.
This is the city from which Germany has been governed since the Bismarck era. For 12 years, Berlin was the capital of the Third Reich. Buildings constructed by the Nazis can still be found in the city today. Though Hitler wasn't fond of Berlin, he did succeed in leaving a lasting impression on its cityscape. Relics from the National Socialist past turn up in unusual places. Hitler's aim was to transform Berlin into the future world capital of Germania. Some of the structures from that era provide an insight into his megalomaniac vision. When the Reich's fall became inevitable, Hitler opted to stay in the unloved capital until the end.
How the fuck?
Idea.
Dude. We can go to. We got Old Town.
Friedrichshain survived the war and the fall of the Reich.
Are you already on the ground? Okay, I see you.
Houses a publishing company.
Oh no, you're green or you're green. I'm yellow. Oh, okay.
Erected on this site in the mid-1930s, as it was right next door to a public hall in which Hitler's stormtroopers and the communists used to brawl at political meetings. True to the style of the National Socialist approach to art, the pompous staircase is lined with natural stone. Even though Gauleiter Josef...
Fuck! I didn't have a fucking
the building's
Simtex.
purpose was to keep the memory of the Nazi
I died
victory
because I'm a
alive
fucking
in Red
dumbass.
Berlin. On Hitler's
You're lucky,
orders,
bud.
Goebbels came to the capital of the Weimar Republic on the 9th of November 1926 with the mission to make the quarreling party
Look, I was taking
members
it
see
easy
reason.
on you. Did you get him?
In a few years, the talented propagandist transformed the radical splinter group into a powerful organization. Right next door to the Gauhaus, the Nazis built a housing estate for deserving fighters for the movement, which also survived the war. In honor of the Gauleiter, it was named Goebbels Heimstätte, or Goebbels Homestead.
Yeah, he's over here on the other side.
Berlin-based
Laying down behind the
journalists
AC.
soon
Oh, no, he ain't.
discovered
He's on the roof.
as
There's
buildings
one behind the
have
AC. Oh, no, he ain't. He's
been
dead,
owners of
too.
buildings for a long
Or, no,
time.
he ain't. He's plating up.
Many of his publications deal with the
There's one on that roof to your right.
past.
The strategy of Joseph Goebbels when he became the new Gauleiter can be summed up in a single word: provocation.
That's who melted
He
me.
deliberately sent his stormtroopers to march across working-class areas, accepting
Little
the fact that many of his
motherfucker.
own people would get injured or even killed in the fighting, because he only had one goal. He wanted publicity, wanted to be noticed. His aim was to spread the notion in the German public that the communists were preparing for civil war and a revolution.
It spawned me way
so
the
that
fuck
he and the
out,
National
bro.
Socialists would then appear as the saviors of the nation, and evidently his strategy worked.
From the party headquarters at Wilhelmsplatz, Gauleiter Goebbels resolutely paved his Führer's way to power in Berlin. This building in the Zimmerstraße was bricked up during the GDR years as it bordered on the Berlin Wall. Up until the end of the war, it housed one of the head offices of Goebbels' propaganda instruments. It was the seat of the party newspapers Völkischer Beobachter and Angriff. After the accession to power in 1933, members of the opposition were tortured to death in its cellars. Yet the building marks an even more important event in the history of Hitler's Berlin. In 1927, the Führer gave his first official speech in the German capital in a dance club named Klu in this courtyard. As Hitler was banned from speaking publicly for many years, he gave his first speeches in Berlin at private meetings. After the ban was lifted, he would soon fill larger halls, such as the Neue Welt and the Sportpalast, with people willing to listen to his inflammatory anti-Semitic speeches. Despite his success, Hitler sustained a love-hate relationship with Berlin for the rest of his life.
He didn't like big
Motherfucker.
cities. He rejected this way of life because he felt it was Jewish modernistic. However, he knew that ultimately the only way to power in Germany was by conquering the cities, and in particular by conquering the Reich's capital.
On the 30th of January 1933, Hitler left his abode in Berlin, the Hotel Kaiserhof, to take over the government. The restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles, the world economic crisis, and unemployment drove many voters to the Nazi Party.
Watch the most live NFL games all season long on a variety of networks and NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube TV. Get it now. Terms and embargoes apply. Cancel anytime.
In order to make the world believe that Germany was a peace-loving country, the Nazis staged the 1936 Olympic Summer Games in Berlin. Hitler personally oversaw the designing of the Olympiastadion and the adjacent sports facilities.
Im Reichssportfeld wird für die Feier der 11. Olympiade eine einzigartige Kampfstätte geschaffen. Das Kernstück des weiten Reichssportfeldes ist das Olympiastadion, die Deutsche Kampfbahn. Um den Innenraum erheben sich Zuschauerplätze für mehr als 100.000 Personen. Unzählige Arbeiter sind Tag und Nacht am Werk. Auch sie schaffen in ihrer Art für die olympische Idee. Wie das ganze deutsche Volk bemüht ist, seinen Gästen einen würdigen Empfang zu bereiten.
Hitler was involved in the choice of the stone to be used in the architectural plans almost from the beginning in 1934. He visited the construction site several times and directly intervened in many issues. In the presence of the French ambassador, André-François Poncet, Hitler said that he didn't like the stadium. He thought it looked too modern.
And where'd he come up out here?
Zur Feier der 11. Olympiade neuer Zeitrechnung als eröffnet.
From his seat in the VIP stand, the dictator was forced to watch as a black US athlete, of all people, became the favorite among the spectators, including the Germans. Jesse Owens beat Hitler's top Aryan athletes to win 4 gold medals. Nearly 4,000 athletes from 49 nations took part in the Games. Most male contestants were housed in the Olympic Village in Döberitz near Berlin. Today the complex stands empty. The area is fenced and the windows of the small houses are boarded up. Back in 1936, the Olympic Village was proudly presented in propaganda films. Foreign journalists were obviously impressed too.
The world would be a happier place,
wrote the correspondent of the British Observer,
if the youth of all nations could be brought together in this way more frequently.
I'll fall from here one more fucking time.
After the end of the Games, the complex was used by the Wehrmacht until the Red Army occupied the area in 1945. Since the departure of the Soviet troops in 1992, the buildings have been empty, scarcely protected from the elements. Little remains of the time when the novel medium of television transmitted live from the Games and the Olympic Village.
Der aktuelle Bilddienst des Fernsehsenders Paul Nipkow lädt Sie heute ein zu einem Streifzug durch das olympische Dorf. Nun durch das Tor.
Fuck you think you're Movement King, bitch?
Und nun sind wir drin. Auf dem viel gelästerten märkischen Sand ist ein kleines Paradies entstanden. Die deutsche Wehrmacht hat es erbaut. Hier ein paar Aktive vor dem Hause Dessau. Wundervoll passen sich die Häuser der Landschaft an und sie sind auch herrlich, massiv und fest gebaut. Es muss ein wundervolles Wohnen sein. Und immer dabei ein Junge vom Olympischen Ehrendienst. Und hier ein amerikanisches Superschwergewicht.
Today, many of the buildings are very run down.
I don't know where he came from, but okay.
No one has thought of a way to put this extensive site to good use. The old indoor swimming pool, where in 1936 the athletes would prepare for their races, is partly burned out. For 2 weeks, Nazi Germany presented itself to the outside world as a peace-loving nation. The Games brought international acceptance for the third round. Only a few far-sighted people realized the Nazis' true intentions. The Jewish novelist Victor Klemperer, for instance, wrote in his diary,
"It is continuously drummed into Germans as well as visitors that what one sees here is the upswing, the blossoming, the new spirit, the unity, the glory and the splendor, and naturally also the peaceful spirit of the Third Reich that affectionately embraces the whole world. The chants and the persecution of the Jews are all forbidden, and the offensive articles have disappeared from the newspapers for the duration of the Olympiad, until the 16th of August.
The less peace-loving face of the new Germany manifested itself at the huge Olympic Tower at the western end of the Reich sports field. It was here that a solemn commemorative service took place for the students who, in 1914, supposedly threw themselves into the machine gun fire of their enemies in Langemarck, Belgium, defying death, an ominous warning for what would happen here later in April 1945. Yet at first, after the end of the Olympic Games, the area was frequently used as a marching ground for National Socialist propaganda functions. It was mainly young people who were impressed by the mystic pomp of the Nazis.
Dude, I'm in the fucking building, bro.
Balance to her gut.
Oh.
What for? 2 gummies a day keep the bad gut vibes away. Ollie's gonna help Mom find the bright side.
I am a ray of frickin' sunshine.
Television journalist Reinhard Appel took part in many mass marches in the presence of the dictator in the Olympic Park when he was a boy.
Being in the Hitler Youth, we would often get orders to applaud or shout Heil at large-scale events. And I was one of those who was supposed to shout Heil. It was 1938, I remember, and there was a celebration for the Hitler Youth, and the whole Reich sports field was full of boys. Back then, I thought it was funny to start off a wave of hailing. Nowadays, you'd call it a Mexican wave. So I would start yelling, Heil, and was very pleased when the entire stadium would respond and follow suit, until I was noticed by a Hitler Youth leader and was thrown out for improper behavior.
Because the National Socialist Youth was to be systematically indoctrinated, the Hitler Youth homes erected all over the Third Reich were identical. A prototype can still be seen today in the northern outskirts of Berlin. It was designed in the style of a rural, half-timbered house and presented at a propaganda show on Berlin's exhibition grounds. Later, it was transferred here to the Volkspark Rehberge.
Must have.
Physical fitness was paramount for National Socialist youths. Military training began at a very early age. The Hitler Youth Homes served the purpose of controlling the boys' spare time. The date, 1936, can still be made out on the fireguard, and little else has changed in the festive hall of the former Hitler Youth Home. Only the Nazi symbols were removed after the end of the war. Today, the home is used as a recreational facility for mentally handicapped children. During the Nazi regime, people like these would be categorized as unworthy to live and ruthlessly murdered. During the mid-1930s...
Oh my god, I ran out of fucking bullets. I had to pull my AR out.
The new era were erected
Fuck.
all over Berlin. Air Minister Hermann Göring had an entire street front demolished at the Wilhelmstrasse in order to create a suitable official building for his ministry. Gradually, the entire government district was given the architectural features of the National Socialist spirit.
Oh.
In the west of Berlin, at Fährberliner Platz, a monumental complex of office buildings constructed during the Third Reich has survived to this day. The Rudolf Karstadt Corporation built its head office in Berlin right across from the Nordstern Life Insurance Complex. It was decorated with National Socialist art, scenes from the working life of the community of the people. The total Führer state had become a reality and had found visible expression in the architecture. Hitler had very clear ideas about the redesigning of his capital. Berlin was to become the symbol of Germany's international standing. His plans covered over half of the urban area. In 1938, the Victory Column, the symbol of the capitulation of France in 1871, was relocated from its position in front of the Reichstag to the newly constructed east-west axis. This connecting route was built by Albert Speer, the Inspector General of Construction for the redesigning of the Reich's capital, and still dominates Berlin today. 5 road intersections form the so-called Great Star. The 10-lane main arterial road, planned for Hitler's triumphal processions, points exactly to the west. The east-west axis was inaugurated on the Führer's 50th birthday.
Oh, Lord, bunker
on the
buster.
20th of April, 1939. In the years that followed, military parades were frequently held here. This footage shows the Legion Condor after its return from the Spanish Civil War. The street lamps on the east-west axis were designed by Albert Speer himself. They still flank part of the thoroughfare. Even beyond the government district,
Bro, we're playing some little
devastated
tryhards,
buildings
bro.
of the Reich's capital were also constructed in the architectural style of National Socialism. The tax office for the borough of Charlottenburg, for example, was moved into a representative monumental building in 1939. The eagle relief above the main entrance is still intact. Only
Little
the
sog
swastika
feels
was
good, bro.
removed after 1945.
He's going this way.
Boasted,
Others may live in the Kremlin or in a castle, but we will make sure that the buildings representing the Reich originate in our own
Get him.
time.
the most important project in Berlin between
Someone just landed on
1936
him.
and 38 was the expansion of the Reich Chancellery. Designed by Albert Speer, the overstated neoclassical architecture of Hitler's center of government stood for the power and the potency of National Socialist Germany.
Yeah, he's up here.
Its monumental dimensions were to dwarf the old buildings from the Kaiser era. Director
Got one up here.
Leni Riefenstahl and her camera were there when workers put the finishing touches on Hitler's new Chancellery of the Reich. On the 7th of January 1939, the architect personally showed his employer around the finished rooms. He had to construct the building within a year, Speer wrote later in his memoirs. But like many of these tales, this is pure fabrication. In reality, the architect had begun planning the Chancellery by the end of 1935. The Chancellery of the Reich was to serve primarily for representation. With its endless corridors, the dictator wanted to overwhelm foreign diplomats so that on the long way to the reception hall, they would get an idea of the true grandeur of the Third Reich. Original marble slabs from the long gallery of the Chancellery can be seen today in the Mohrenstrasse underground station in the middle of Berlin's
Fuck, I did not mean to fall.
district. They were installed here after the end of the war. Most passengers are oblivious to the
Oh, fuck.
past.
What'd I get from Mountain?
Refers to their original use. Naturally, Albert Speer also designed the reception rooms and the Führer's
Stupid,
stand very
stupid.
graviously. This way, the dictator was able to achieve the desired effects at the New Year's reception. for
Will
the
you stop
diplomatic
touching me?
corps.
The Model L's pretty good, ain't it? I like it.
Here you go, miss. Now what?
Have you heard of carparts.com? Check this out.
They have over 1 million quality parts?
That are guaranteed
She's
to fit
sniping
At
at me.
incredible prices?
and hassle-free returns.
Oh, I guess you didn't need my help after all.
Nope, I just needed carparts.com.
Available at your fingertips. 24/7.
Great.
Now that's my speed.
He's right above you. Liam, that building across from you, over where I was.
The ruins of the Chancellery of the Reich were
He's coming to get his loot
by the
right now.
Soviet occupying power after the end of the war, and the last remnants of the Führer's bunker disposed of by GDR authorities in 1988. However, 2 years later, in 1990, A forgotten bunker used by the dictator's motor pool drivers was discovered accidentally. The bunker, built in 1940, comprises 8 small rooms.
Dude, we're playing some little Movement Kings today, bro.
The rooms were used by the SS escort commandos of
Oh,
the
okay.
Bodyguard Regiment.
Big building seems pretty clear.
It seems that during the last days of the war,
I'll go up here and see if I can get a few
SS
snappy
soldiers
ripes off.
themselves here.
This entire corner was full of stored
Yeah,
ammunition.
I kind of do. I need to make a
Infantry
drink too.
ammunition, hand grenades, bazookas, rifles, pistols. We therefore assumed that this room was the changing room and served as the arms depot at the same time.
In one of the rooms, amateurish attestations of National Socialist art were discovered. Enormous wall paintings glorifying the heroic service of SS soldiers. After the archaeological survey, the bunker was closed off again. I want Berlin to be more beautiful than Paris ever was, Hitler apparently said after viewing the occupied capital
Yeah,
of France.
choked your bitch ass out,
The
didn't I?
megalomania of the dictator in designing the new Berlin knew no bounds. More and more new sketches and drafts were created on the drawing tables of the Inspector General of Construction for the Reich's capital. Hitler had been dreaming of gigantic edifices since his youth. Now, Albert Speer was designing them for him. The architect calculated annual costs of up to 500 million Reichsmarks. He had models made on a 1:50 scale and created a small imaginary city, which he proudly presented to his patron. The dictator hoped that everything would be finished within 20 years.
Okay.
Hitler's vision of the world capital, Germania, involved pulling down large parts of the city center to make room for new, magnificent buildings. The inhabitants of the houses were resettled into dwellings that had belonged to deported Jews. However, the architect and his assistants were not sure whether the grand plans to build Germania were technically feasible. They were concerned that, after all, they might remain a vision. Would Berlin's underground be strong enough to bear the enormous loads of stone and concrete? The experts were asking themselves. To test this, they had an immense, odd-looking concrete cylinder built, which still stands today in the Tempelhof district. Due to its unusual shape, the locals have nicknamed it Pilz, the mushroom.
Yeah. Down with my song.
Association is one of the experts in little-known relics from Berlin's National Socialist past.
He's dead.
Arnold, a civil
Down here.
engineer, has also investigated the history of this unusual structure, which, up until a few years ago, was still used for soil mechanical experiments by the Technical University of Berlin.
This structure is a load-testing body built by French slave laborers in 1940 to 41 to establish whether the huge buildings planned for Germania could be erected on Berlin's soil. This was a stability test.
I think one just went up a zip line, big building.
In 1941, its total weight was 12,600 tons.
Down.
Engineers found it had subsided by 20 centimeters and slanted by
Another one up there.
centimeters. But because of the immense load exerted here compared to a regular building, they thought this wouldn't present
other crane.
feasible, using this structure as proof.
He's right here.
A model made for Hitler demonstrated how the north-south axis, starting from the gigantic Südbahnhof station, would pass a 117-meter-tall triumphal arch and end at the monstrous domed Volkshalle. Hitler had demanded that his capital match the magnitude of his mission. Spear's engineers had worked assiduously on a 3-meter-tall model of the Great Hall.
The architectural design of Germania can be
That's not
summarized
Rover
in
somewhere. I
consideration.
don't fucking know. I think it's the
The
other
Great
crane.
Hall, which was to be 290 meters high, is the most gigantic and also the best known project of Hitler's plans for Germania. It would have been absolutely impossible to realize the hall with the technology of the time. If cost were no object, it would probably be possible to build it today. However, it
I
would
want
be
flying in
impossible
right
to
here.
predict how long it would stand, or whether it would survive a heavy spring or autumn storm. The Great Hall, with a capacity of 120,000 people, was to be built out there, to the north of where we stand and south of the Bahnhof. In front of it would be an enormous assembly square, 6 times the size of St. Peter's Square in Rome, bordered by enormous dominant edifices. The
I'm up here,
Reichstag
he
had been
broke
demoted
as
to an
fuck.
auxiliary building. An important part of the designs was the traffic planning. 4 tunnel sections were already completed by 1940, but then construction work was suspended as not essential to the war effort. 3 tunnel sections are still intact, 2 road tunnels and a 220-meter-long subway tunnel, and can be visited. Actually, these tunnels are the last remnants of Germania that still exist in this area.
Somewhere in the Tiergarten is the carefully concealed entrance to one of the 2 road tunnels. The Senate administration of the capital aims to prevent unauthorized entry. The descent is dangerous.
He ain't got no fucking plates, bro.
Being an added risk.
Almost down on my SOG from here, bro.
You can win big on Hard Rock Bet with a little bet.
Yeah.
Or a Post Malone size bet.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why I didn't just hit the fucking zip and come across.
Every kind of player. Hard Rock Bet. Roll with us.
At the moment, the air is clear. Dietmar Arnold can describe the construction on site.
Say hello to the SOG, bitch.
We're now about 9 meters below the Tiergarten, in the western tunnel of the junction of the 2 axes. It's nearly 90 meters long, 14 wide and 4.8 meters high, and would have become an expressway tunnel. These are remnants of Germania. The junction of the axes was the point of intersection of the planned east-west and north-south axes. Only the east-west axis was completed to a large extent. Today consists of the Straße des 17. Juni and Unter den Linden, while the north-south axis was never built.
Oh, I thought he had.
This is what remains today of these preposterous plans. This tunnel was rediscovered as late as 1967. As you can see here, the roof has been renovated. The authorities have calculated that it's cheaper to just leave them as they are.
Get the fuck off me!
Cars never
Fucking claw my damn shoulder.
At some point during the war, a partition was evidently erected. Armament production is said to
I love dogs, man.
here to escape.
Whoever I did is just go buy a fucking dog or go get a dog, dude. Like, they need their fucking mental node fucking checked. No, get out of here, whore. I get up, there's a big old fat gawping fucking pile of shit behind my gaming chair.
During the Allied bombings.
This is the access staircase where people used to enter. What I think is particularly interesting is the extent of wear on the rungs. It shows that masses of people must have used them to get into the tunnel. In fact, this staircase could have been used by the Civil Air Defense. The top was concreted over in the 1960s.
Finally went and bought one of them little fireplace heaters. Yeah, which is nice. Keeps the living room toasty. Okay.
Newsreels have been calling on the people to put up fanatical resistance since the beginning of the Allied air raids.
Yeah.
The propaganda films were made in the ministry of Joseph Goebbels, not far from the
That motto L is
Todesweg.
nice. What I like about it too
The
is it's like
Minister
shaped
for
like the
Propaganda,
STG.
a fanatic acolyte of Hitler's, had this representative official building constructed in the mid-1930s.
It's got like the red symbol on it.
Exercised total control.
Has like a
public opinion in the Third
yeah.
Reich,
That's it. That's it.
leaving
That's the one I got.
to chance.
Look, I think it was like an endowment thing for fucking playing Call of Duty for so long. So don't hold me to that. I'm supposing.
Confers with his assistants today. The Nazis were drafting
Oh no, I'm not in there.
battles over 60 years ago.
I'm not in the room.
As the war progressed, Goebbels became a kind of home front dictator, trying to whitewash the bitter truth of the bomb war and appealing to the Germans to bear up. However, the minister had taken precautions regarding his own security. A bomb-proof private shelter was built in his official residence. The remainders of this bunker were discovered accidentally during construction work in 1998 and sealed up again shortly afterwards. Little is known about the setup of Goebbels' bunker. Apparently, the rooms were not luxuriously furnished, yet the minister could be permanently in touch with the outside world by means of a modern telephone system. His diaries reveal that, in the case of an air raid alarm, he would go either to his private shelter or to the underground command post at Wilhelmsplatz. On the 24th of November 1943, the minister wrote in his diary,
"The raid begins shortly after the alarm has sounded. This time they deploy more explosive than in bombs. This is another large-scale air raid. The fires are starting all around us, and the entire government district is hit by substantial bombs and mines. They devastate the area around Potsdamer Platz. The blast waves are so strong that even our bunker deep under the ground is rattling. The noise above us
I ain't even picked it up
is
yet.
hellish."
Later on, he continues,
"When I look around Wilhelmsplatz after the raid, the grim impressions of the night before are confirmed.
Within just a few days, 3,700 Berliners were killed and 450,000 became homeless. A few days later, in the Titania Palast, Goebbels gave one of his fanatical endurance speeches, culminating in the slogan, "The whole of Germany is crying for revenge." The Allied air raids made survival for the few Jews remaining in Berlin even more difficult. They could not seek safety in a shelter, so they had to look for new hiding places in the outskirts of the city if they wanted to avoid the dreaded catchers. Since 1941, over 50,000 of Berlin's Jews had been taken to the ghettos and concentration camps in the east. Few of them survived. During the so-called Fabrikaktion, or factory raids, at the end of February 1943, another 8,000 or more Jews working as slave laborers were displaced by the Gestapo. The old Jewish hospital in the Scheunenviertel, or Bahn district,
I just saw somebody right here.
for refugee children from Eastern Europe since the First World War. From 1941 to 1943, the Nazis misappropriated the building as an assembly camp for Berlin Jews before deporting them to the extermination camps. In most cases, the deportees weren't told the day they would leave the assembly camp.
I was making some money by delivering rolls in the morning before school. One of the people I would deliver to was a Jewish physician in Spandau. I will never forget the distrustful, frightened eyes of his wife every time I rang the bell to let them know that the rolls were there.
You got somebody on you?
She was in constant fear of being arrested by the Nazis.
The dictator made very few public appearances during the war, fearing he would become the target of an Allied precision attack, and he was rarely in Berlin. The longest he stayed in the Reich capital was 10 days in 1943. As a result, he had no first-hand experience of what his subjects were going through.
Adolf Hitler was in Berlin in the autumn of 1940 during several relatively minor air raids. By chance, or what Adolf Hitler would have called premonition, he happened not to be in Berlin during any of the heavy raids from the beginning of 1941 to the autumn of 1944. Sometimes he would board his private train and leave Berlin just a few hours before a raid.
Fuck, I'm watching.
Sometimes he didn't come to Berlin for several months. In any case, Hitler never visited any of the areas hit. He left that to his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels.
In February 1944, Goebbels wrote in his diary,
"The Führer has expressed very warm words for the composure of Berlin's population. He stresses that Berlin has truly become the Reich's capital during the air raids of the previous months. The bravery of Berlin's citizens demonstrated during the attacks was not thought possible in large parts of the German nation and in the entire world."
Still, Nazi leaders were looking into improved protection measures for the citizens from the bombs so as to keep up their resolve on the home front. More and more residential buildings were hit or destroyed in a firestorm by the Allied high-explosive or
Down here, this end.
bombs. A result of these deliberations can be seen in a forest 100 kilometers north of Berlin. Odd-looking shelter constructions on the grounds of the former secret Luftwaffe test site in Rechtlin. The locals have named them White Houses. Documents of the time provide information concerning...
Oh, Lord, I rotated the wrong way, fuck.
According to
oh, yeah, I didn't know he was out there.
Bombs were tested on these towers in July and August 1943. The documents refer to a Berlin borough, so these buildings may have been model houses for Hitler's capital, Germania, which were tested here to see just how bomb-proof they were.
Oh, slow he moves.
Were Berlin citizens to survive the bombing attacks in this way, in standardized houses with built-in shelter towers from reinforced concrete? There is no clear answer to this question. The results of the bombing tests on these prototypes are also unknown. By then, the sirens howled in Berlin almost daily.
Yeah, one landed right here.
People had to spend
He's crossing the road. He's probably in this building now.
Air raid shelters. Latecomers were faced with locked doors. Going in and out of shelters became everyday routine for many Berliners, including the staff and patients of the city's hospitals. At the former Humboldt Hospital on Teichstrasse, one of these bomb-proof shelters is open to visitors. It was built in the vicinity.
He's up here, all the way up.
In 1942, and served as an operation shelter, Type A.
Killed the one that was on the ground. No, there's another one up there.
The post-operative
He's down here now.
Taken from the hospital straight into the shelter through a subterranean passage over a ramp. Behind the protection of heavy iron gates and thick reinforced concrete, the doctors could even perform complicated surgical operations. Filter systems protected physicians, nurses, and patients from poisonous gases. Today, this relic from Hitler's Berlin is supervised by the Berlin Underworlds Association.
Patients had to be operated on during the bombing attacks too.
Yeah, they're all focused on you.
Not bomb-proof, and the Allied bombers, flying at an altitude of 7,000 or 8,000 meters, could not drop their payload accurately enough to spare the hospitals, which had red crosses painted on the roof. From March 1944 onwards, when the Americans started to bomb Berlin during the day, operations were always performed in the shelters. As far as the equipment was available, nearly all hospitals moved their operating rooms into the shelters simply for safety reasons. Altogether, we had 28 operation shelters in Berlin.
Oh, just some
Every
Gigadad.
major hospital had one or two. The fact that this one is so well preserved is actually just a historical coincidence. It was used for many years as a storage facility for the Senate, until our association took this shelter under our wing 1.5 years ago. Now we're gradually restoring it.
Well, that puts me in something that don't have no
Surgical
fucking
instruments
windows.
From the time were collected from all around Germany in order to outfit the shelter as accurately in every detail as possible.
En Great Wolf Lodge te esperan increíbles emociones. En cada tobogán, aventuras y fiestas para bailar todas las noches. Ven con tu manada y reserva hoy y fortalece la manada.
You like them shots, don't you, boy?
After Joseph Goebbels' declaration of total war, his propaganda machinery kept inventing new rallying calls. Our walls are broken, but not our hearts, was one of the cynical slogans. Others included, the warring city of Berlin greets the Führer, and Führer command, we will obey.
Well, come around in the building, he's broke.
Despite the precautions the Nazis had taken, Berlin city center was also...
Bro, come on, man!
Times.
Fucking right!
3 enormous anti-aircraft
He's all on my body.
had been hurriedly erected for the protection of the government district. The remains of one of these flak towers can still be found today at Humboldthain, north of the city center. The reinforced concrete giant was only partly destroyed when the victors tried to demolish it. A few years ago, the Berlin Underworlds Association was granted permission to open the existing entrances and explore the tower's interior. Tons of rubble were removed from the ruin before a first inspection of the bizarre bunker system became possible.
I'm like, for real, 13 miles out.
Gradually, elevator shafts and former ammunition depots were revealed. It was sometimes a risky business for the researchers. Today, parts of the gigantic structure are accessible. The structure was shaken by the blasting attempts of the Allies after the war. The ceiling sagged visibly. Whether or not they will cave in one day is unclear. When put into service in 1942,
Sniper.
the flak tower was classified as indestructible, and this is obviously still true today, if only partly. A network of corridors and staircases extend as deep as 8 stories below the ground.
Maybe we should put up a proper fence here, down there at the back. This is as far as it goes.
Broke his armor.
We're now in the so-called Turret 3 of the Humboldthain Flak Tower, an anti-aircraft tower which consisted of 4 gun turrets. Facing us here are the main elevator shaft and the main spiral staircase. The elevator shaft went from the ground floor to the 4th floor. The stairs went another floor up to the 5th floor. The stairwell was actually only used by the garrison until 1943, when the civilian population was permitted to use it for seating because there weren't enough bunker facilities in Berlin. What you can see here are the effects of the blastings. The entire stairwell has caved in except for the area between the 5th and the 4th floor, and there are huge chunks of reinforced concrete still hanging from the walls. So it's extremely dangerous to venture down there because in some parts, these chunks, which weigh tons, could come loose at any time, something you definitely want to avoid. Here you can see very clearly the damage caused by the blasting in '48 by the French occupying power. We're in the French sector here. As we know, Germany was to be demilitarized and bunkers were considered military structures. The French detonated 3 charges in total. The first had no effect whatsoever.
Yeah, it's up the hill over here where I'm at.
Only parts of the bunker. and only after the third charge did the rear end cave in. It collapsed like a house of cards. By the way, the Soviets
Ooh,
and
getting
Brits
shot from
had the same
148.
problems with the flak towers in their sectors. They were difficult to demolish because of the vast amounts of concrete used.
The huge concrete towers offered protection for up to 30,000 people, but also for valuable museum pieces during the Allied air raids. Even some armament production was relocated here. In the end, their heavy anti-aircraft guns were not enough to prevent the fall of Berlin.
Me too, I got 100. I got ammunition in the box. Where do you just land?
Demolishing the ruins would be far too expensive, so this relic from the Second World War will continue to be used by the bunker experts in future for research and expeditions.
Everyone deserves a fast and reliable connection, one that helps better their everyday through the things they value most: friends and family, education and career. A connection that opens pathways to opportunity and builds roads to a better future. At Spectrum, we're committed to delivering just that every single day. Because with the right connection, anything's possible. That's Life Unlimited. That's Spectrum.
Großstadtverkehr Juli 1943 in der Reichshauptstadt am Alexanderplatz. Straßenbahnen, Lastkraftwagen mit Lebensmitteln und sonstiger kriegswichtiger Ladung und ringsherum die Hochhäuser und Büros, in denen Männer und Frauen für den Sieg arbeiten.
Air raid shelter systems were built all around Berlin, including beneath the Alexanderplatz. A television film of the time about Market Garden in the city centre unintentionally shows the ventilation shafts of the subterranean bunker system. Stretching over 2 stories, the Alexanderplatz bunker was the largest underground shelter in the city.
There's another one in there.
According to a special plan, all mainline railway stations in Berlin were outfitted with such shelter systems during the war, with the aim of putting up travellers in the case of a bombing attack. Later in the war, residents of the area and passers-by were also allowed to use the extensive shelter.
I got a sniper up there.
During the final stages of the war, we had to go into the air raid shelter almost every day. By then, the war had arrived in Berlin with the bombing attacks. I remember spending many nights in the shelter. I also remember that during an event organized by the Hitler Youth, we had to go into a shelter. But because I didn't want to, I ran away and walked along the Heerstraße towards home, while the air raid was in full swing. I could see the bombers dropping their load, but I wasn't scared. I walked for over an hour from Unter den Linden all the way to Spandau, and somehow I got home unharmed.
In his function as commissary for the total war effort, Joseph Goebbels assembled Volkssturm or Home Guard divisions in late 1944 and had them march in front of the Brandenburg Gate for propaganda purposes.
Der Tag des Volkssturms ist ein kraftvoller Beweis dafür, dass kein Feindterror das deutsche Volk beugen kann und dass die Herzen seiner Menschen über Masse, Material und Hass triumphieren werden.
The elderly, members of the Hitler Youth, semi-invalids and even women were trained to use anti-tank rocket launchers with the intention of stopping the advancing Red Army. At the beginning of February 1945, Goebbels declared Berlin a fortress.
Oh, it was you. I said, better get off me.
Adolf Hitler had his final appearance on the newsreel of the 20th of March. The Führer decorated Hitler Youth boys who had fought Soviet units with their bazookas. Shortly before the end, even the last underage reserves were mobilized and mercilessly annihilated in
Damn, land on me, why don't you?
The The Olympic Tower was also converted into a stronghold of fanatic Nazi no-surrender terror. Here too, child soldiers were deployed in an attempt to halt the Soviet advance into the city center. All of those unwilling to participate in this senseless suicide mission were publicly shot.
The
Volkssturm men and Hitler Youth boys, who were the last contingent, had barricaded themselves in at several locations with orders to defend the government district. One of these places was the Reich Sports Field. At the end of April 1945, at least 3, maybe even 4,000 Hitler Youth boys confronted the far superior Red Army. How many of them died remains uncertain.
Wie viele davon getötet wurden, ist umstritten.
Ich wollte nicht, dass die Russen nach Berlin
I didn't want the Russians to capture Berlin, so I wanted to defend the city at any cost. Better dead than a slave was one of the slogans they had hammered into us. Self-sacrifice is an heroic deed. I honestly admit that I was quite prepared to sacrifice myself because this was how I was brought up, to defend the fatherland by all means, even accepting death.
Das Vaterland zu verteidigen, dass ich auch den Tod in Kauf genommen hätte.
The Führer didn't care about the senseless sacrifice of the Hitler Youth boys and his soldiers. He didn't leave his last bastion alive. On the 6th of May,
well, let me shoot back.
The defenders were forced to leave the Chancellery of the Reich through the open gates of the subterranean bunkers before a running camera. This appearance of Hitler's last disciples was staged by the Soviets for the newsreel at home. The curious victors wandered across the heavily damaged seat of government of the dictator.
Damn, whichever one of y'all laid this needs y'all fucking butthole check. Motherfucker, dude. Bitch is big around my forearm.
Hitler's
Bulldog, you stretch that thing out?
Found buried in the garden, not far from the remains of his designated successor.
Oh, yeah. I felt like a sandpaper log.
Had poisoned their 6 children shortly before the capitulation and then committed suicide. The history of National Socialist Berlin was over. Tanks that had participated in the capture of Berlin flanked the Soviet monument at the Reichstag, which the victors erected at the end of 1945 in memory of those fallen in the Great Patriotic War. For many decades, it was suggested that stones from Hitler's new chancellery were used in its construction to symbolize the victory over National Socialism. But this is probably just a propagandistic legend that helped to seal the fall of Hitler's Berlin.
Now Taxes is getting the TurboTax app and filing your taxes yourself 100% free if you didn't file with us last year. Pay $0 when you file by 2/18. All tax forms, all 100% free. Now this is taxes. File free in the app by 2/18. When you switch to TurboTax, do it yourself.
During the Nazi years, Munich was given the honorary title Capital of the Movement. After the fall of the Third Reich, however, its citizens wanted to do away with the city's fascist past, and Munich suppressed its National Socialist history. Yet remnants of the time are still omnipresent in Bavaria's capital, shaping the cityscape to this day. The Nazis inaugurated the new buildings with huge celebrations, perfectly staged for maximum propaganda effect. On the day of German art in 1937, for instance, all the Nazi notables were assembled in Munich.
Yeah, I'm not far.
On
I'm like
some
level
house fronts,
52, I
the
think.
symbols of the Wehrmacht and the Nazi Party are visible to this day. Not all of them were removed at the end of the war. The remains of the so-called Brauner's house, however, were filled in 60 years ago and only recently excavated. Hitler had great plans for Munich. The entire city centre was to be redesigned. An original model illustrating the mammoth project to survive the war undamaged. A boulevard was to lead to the newly constructed railway station. Its enormous dome would have towered above all other buildings in the area. Hitler, who had always dreamt of being an architect, paid regular visits to the construction site, carefully scrutinizing the ongoing work. Today, hardly a trace remains of the fact that the Königsplatz was one of the centers of the National Socialist movement. After remodeling the square, the Nazis used it for their marches. In addition, Königsplatz was also the stage for an annual propaganda event honoring the early martyrs of the party, a pseudo-religious cult of the dead.
National Socialism started out in this city. This is where the German Workers' Party, the forerunner of the NSDAP, was founded in 1919. This is where the SA, the SS and the Hitler Youth were formed. This is where the Reich headquarters of the NSDAP were located. This is where Adolf Hitler rose from being an insignificant army informer to the leader of the most powerful party in Germany.
After the end of the First World War,
Wendy and
Munich's pubs
Angel
were
had their
used
end of
by
the year
all
banquet,
political parties as venues for their meetings.
and I think Daddy's in this room.
In 1919, the army sent Adolf Hitler to spy on a meeting of the German Workers' Party in the Sternecker brewery. But instead of passing information to his superiors, Hitler himself joined the party, which changed its name to NSDAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, early in 1920, and took over its leadership within a few months. The fact that the patrons in Munich's breweries were usually intoxicated made it easy to stir up emotions. Even back then, the Hofbräuhaus was one of the most popular beer halls. The Nazis were quick to realize that the atmosphere here ideally suited their purposes. So along with the Sternecker brewery and the Burgerbräu and Löwenbräu cellars, the Hofbräuhaus was one of the first centers of the National Socialist movement.
Munich was a very fertile breeding ground for the National Socialist ideas, which were mainly nationalism, racism and anti-Semitism. These ideas of an initially small extremist right-wing group were very well received here. It all originated in the beer cellars, where heated speeches fueled up resentment after the lost war.
I was in a game on my own.
Political meetings had been held in the Great Ballroom since the beginning of the 20th century. The hall was largely destroyed by Allied air raids at the end of the Second World War and was rebuilt in 1950.
Yeah, don't do shit. They don't care.
Hitler, too, used the charged atmosphere in the beer halls as a stage for his preposterous and grotesque rantings. In 1937, on the occasion of the Nazi Party's 14th anniversary, he gave a speech on the birth of the Nazi movement in the ballroom of the Hofbräuhaus.
Ich weiß, dass damals viele die Aussichtslosigkeit dieser Bewegung beurteilten nach dem Maß ihrer damaligen Größe und dem Maß der Größe der Aufgaben, die gestellt waren. Wollen wir denn in dieser Stunde wieder unseren alten Schlachtruf ausstoßen? Unsere nationalsozialistische Partei und das deutsche Volk und das deutsche Reich dienen Sie!
Hitler was determined to take up the fight against the hated Weimar Republic. Together with General Ludendorff, a prominent World War veteran, and several thousand supporters, he attempted a revolt on the 9th of November, 1923. Their march was stopped at the Feldherrenhalle. 4 policemen and 16 putschists died in the shootout. The putsch leaders were arrested. After seizing power in 1933, the Nazi leaders held a commemorative ceremony here every year for the early martyrs of the movement. The 9th of November was declared a national holiday, and the Odeonsplatz Square became one of the central places commemorating the bloodshed and the martyrs. The Nazis put up a plaque with the names of all the victims outside the Feldherrenhalle, which passers-by had to salute in honor of the dead. The shrine was removed by the Americans in 1945. Since 1994, a memorial slab on the ground honors the memory of the 4 policemen killed in that gunfight. Only 3 months after the failed putsch, its initiators, Adolf Hitler, Erich Ludendorff, and another 8 National Socialists, were tried for high treason. Due to the enormous interest of the public and among the press, the trial was held in the military school for safety reasons. The verdict was lenient. Hitler had supporters in the judiciary system and the police.
Munich politicians, as well as the police, strongly inclined to the right. There were close ties between the NSDAP and many senior police officials, and these people more or less facilitated the rise of the party. The local press also helped to spread Nazi literature. It was a collaboration which really only existed here in Munich.
Das war eine Konstellation, wie es sie nur in München gab.
At the end of 1924, after only 10 months, Hitler was released from the fortress where he was being held. During his time in prison, he dictated the script for Mein Kampf to his later deputy, Rudolf Hess. On his return to Munich, Hitler sought to consolidate the party's position. In 1925, the re-established NSDAP opened its offices on the premises of the Völkische Beobachter newspaper in the Lehel district.
Oh my goodness gracious, not the best, man.
Within 2 years, the number of members had trebled. By 1928, over 100,000 names were listed in the National Socialist Party's records. These pictures from the head office show a young Heinrich Himmler as an eager assistant. Soon he will become one of the most unscrupulous henchmen of the Nazi regime and the man responsible for the death of millions. Soon afterwards, the party headquarters were moved to the district of Schwabing. When the number of members trebled again in 1930 compared to the previous year, Hitler started to look for an imposing building, quote, befitting the importance and the calling of the NSDAP. Palais Barlow, a classical building near Königsplatz, was found. In January 1931, Hitler and his 56 assistants moved into the stately property, which from then on was popularly known as Brauner's House. In the summer of 2006, a team of experts worked here for 6 months to uncover the foundations of the former Nazi Party headquarters, of which only the cellar walls remain intact. Munich's new documentation center for the National Socialist era will be constructed on this historically significant site in 2008. But before the remainders of the past are eliminated, the ruins of the Brauner's house are to be archaeologically surveyed and evaluated in detail.
Es war
It was clear to all of us involved that one could not just commence with the structural planning
The
here.
what?
Before that, we would have to examine what used to be the basement and
The
see what we
KK
could
again?
find, mainly for two reasons. Firstly, to see if we could make any discoveries which might be used in the later documentation. We now know this is clearly not the case. Or, and that would have been the negative scenario, if we found something that might prevent the concept, which would have forced us to rethink the whole plan.
Oder ob man, das wäre sozusagen der negative Fall gewesen, hier in Anführungszeichen Entdeckungen machen würde, die dem Konzept im Wege stünden und man dann von neu nachdenken müsste.
But this was not the case either. Things have been relatively unspectacular since we began here in August. We've discovered a maze of walls that look exciting, but nothing of extraordinary contemporary historical significance.
That was the initial opinion of the experts involved in the project, until they discovered aluminium stencils with set-in copies for party documents. This proved that the cellar had contained the records office of the Nazi Party, which was believed to be lost.
And let me do the spicy bread. Add bacon and cheese on that for me, if you don't mind. And for the drink, I'll do a large Dr. Pepper. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. All right, we'll be back. All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
The sports book for every kind of player. Hard Rock Bet. Roll with us.
When American troops occupied Munich in May 1945, they found that the Palais Barlow had been razed to the ground by two direct hits of Allied bombers. The ruins were looted by Munich citizens and GIs. Anything of use was taken away. Soon afterward, the site was leveled. It was only 60 years later that the Regional Office for the Preservation of Historic Monuments decided to unearth the ruins. Moritz Tannebauer is the on-site director of this uncovering project.
Dies ist jetzt der Keller des Braunen Hauses.
This is the cellar of the Browner's house. Of course, the area looked totally different when we started out. It was covered by a nice wall. We had no idea what to expect.
Mauern dann freigelegt.
We started excavating and uncovered all the walls, then the individual rooms. Where we are now, for instance, is the kitchen area. Over there, one of our people is making a sketch of the walls. The walls have been cleaned, of course, to show up every detail.
What makes you like see a girl walk in the house with a stain pool?
The kitchen here had direct access to the dining area, which consisted of several rooms, one behind the other, with wooden floors and paneling on the walls.
Actually, don't show this part. How do you?
Wir fotografieren, wir zeichnen.
We take photographs, draw, survey and analyze, just like we would do in any archaeological excavation.
Hier sind wir im Bereich des Kellers.
Now we're in the boiler room. The big boiler, which was here, was used until the building was connected to the main heating system during the construction of the so-called Führerbau.
Vom sogenannten Führerbau an die allgemeine Heizungsanlage angeschlossen.
From here, we enter the machinery room, which is not part of the old Palais Barlow.
Technischer Raum. Hier verlassen wir das alte Palais Barlow. Man sieht es ganz deutlich.
That's obvious from the thickness of the walls. Here they created a passageway to this extension, which was built in 1931 and was mainly used for technical installations, such as a pump station for sewage. This was the foundation for the pumps they used to dispose of waste.
Fundament für Pumpen und wo da eben das Schmutzwasser wieder herausgenommen werden konnte aus dem Haus.
Despite the new discoveries, the authorities are sticking to their plans to remove the remains of the Nazi past in 2007. A possible incorporation of the existing cellars into the new building documentation center is not favoured. The final decision on the design will be made in 1 year.
Ain't got to update or nothing, do you?
But by then, the historically important cellar structures will have long disappeared. Adolf Hitler's private dwelling was on the other side of the River Isar. He lived in a 400-square-meter apartment on the fashionable Prinzregentenplatz, where he had moved in 1929. Wealthy supporters paid the rent for this luxurious apartment. Today, the building houses a police station. Chief Inspector Dieter Vögele has been researching the history of the house for many years.
Das sind die Räume der Hitlerwohnung.
These are the rooms of Hitler's apartment. It occupied a total area of 397.5 square meters.
Da befindet sich in diesem Raum
This is the hallway.
Teil vom Ess- und
That room was part of the dining room.
und Speisezimmer. Da haben wir das
This was the living room.
Zimmer, wo die
And here was the guest room where Geli Raubal lived.
Hitler's niece took her own life under mysterious circumstances in her uncle's apartment in 1931. Apparently, Hitler never got over her suicide. After her death, no one except himself was allowed to enter her room. Today it serves as a storage room.
Jetzt dann weiter in das Bad.
The bathroom is through there. It was accessible from both rooms.
10-4. I'm in the kitchen right now.
Und jetzt kommen wir in die spärlich
And this was his Spartan bedroom, with just a bed, a table, and a small cupboard.
Schränkchen gestanden ist. Hier haben wir einen Teil vom Wohnzimmer.
This was part of the living room. We're using it as a computer training room today.
Und hier haben wir
And this is the vintage library from the time of the United Workshops in Munich.
aus der Zeit von den Vereinigten Werkstätten in München gefertigt. Und die war vollgestellt.
It was crammed with books because Hitler was a very well-read man.
Und jetzt
Now we use it to display the cups we've won at police football championships.
für die sportlichen Erfolge, die wir erzielt haben im Punkt der Fußball. Und hier war dann die Couch.
And this is the exact spot where the couch stood on which Geli Raubal was found dead in September 1931.
Air raid shelter can still be found in the cellar. Hitler had ordered it to be built for himself and the other residents. As of 1938, he owned the entire building. In accordance with the regulations, this private shelter was approved by the local building control office just after the beginning of the war, in November 1939. The panelled room in the centre of the underground shelter was obviously reserved for the dictator. However, Hitler never used this bunker. After the war began, he spent very little time in his Munich home. After the accession to power in 1933, the Nazis systematically began to eliminate the remaining democratic elements all across the Reich. Stormtrooper marches became part of the daily routine in Munich's streets too. The elected Bavarian government capitulated without resistance on the 9th of March. Now opponents of the new regime were mercilessly persecuted and sent to the nearby concentration camp in Dachau.
Whatever you do it for less at Harbor Freight.
Ok, ¿listo para evitar hablar del salario?
This footage shows the arrival of the newly elected Reich Chancellor at Munich's Riem Airport. From now on, Hitler mainly stayed in
Come on, Bulldog, let's go, baby.
His visits to Munich became less and less frequent.
Come on.
The political power of the National Socialists
Pissing me off.
was gradually transferred to Berlin. And then, after 1933, Berlin became the center of political power. But Adolf Hitler had explicitly decreed that Munich, which was given the honorary title Capital of the Movement in 1935, should remain the seat of the NSDAP national headquarters.
Sitz der Reichsleitung der NSDAP bleiben solle. Deswegen sind hier von
This is the reason why certain institutions from all the party's administrative departments had their offices here, in the area between Königsplatz and Karolinenplatz.
The Nazis have been using the area around Königsplatz for their marches since the early days. On Hitler's decree, the site was to be converted to a forum of the movement. Paul Ludwig Trost, one of the Führer's preferred architects, had the square tiled with granite slabs especially for their marches, in order to amplify the noise produced by the parading formations. It was the first major construction project of the new government, and Hitler frequently inspected its progress. Rare footage from the personal archives of Albert Speer shows him probably in the autumn of 1935. The dictator was interested in every detail. After the Königsplatz, he went on to examine the two so-called blood temples at the front of the square, and afterwards the shell of the
49 pieces a second.
His plan was to have a complex built covering the entire area between Karolinenplatz and Königsplatz to accommodate the party headquarters. The Führerbau was erected next to the identically constructed NSDAP administration building on the eastern side of Königsplatz. The imposing building was intended to be used for receptions and state ceremonies, and was accordingly pompously furnished. Nazi propaganda claimed that some of Hitler's own ideas had been incorporated in the plans. However, he didn't show up here often. As of 1957, the building was used by the College for Theatre and Music. The Munich Agreement was signed on the 29th of September 1938, here in Hitler's former study. In the previous months, Nazi propaganda had been reporting on alleged ill treatment of the German minority in Czechoslovakia. With this treaty, the European powers agreed to the German Reich's annexation of Sudetenland in the hope of preventing a war. A year later, the German Wehrmacht invaded Poland.
What now? Just got to turn the hacks off for a little
The
while.
underground tunnel system beneath the Führerbau has also survived.
This is one of the underground connecting passages. The entire party headquarters was subterraneously connected. This is the tunnel that led to the Brauner's house. Over there is a longer tunnel that went beneath Brienner Straße, ending at the NSDAP administration building. On the walls, you can still see all the graffiti the Americans left behind.
American GIs scrawled their initials on the walls in 1945. Over 60 years later, these inscriptions indicate the stations of their deployment during the war.
These were the storerooms of the Führerbau. As the compound mainly served representational purposes, receptions and banquets and so on, they needed large storage facilities for supplies. This was the beer cellar, and over there was the red wine cellar. After the war, the Americans wrote,
It's one of
"Keep
them
out,
question life
Germans and co."
flashes.
This was the potato cellar, which was looted by the locals before the Americans arrived. The guards had already left by then. Before the Americans came, people forced open this door. The bullet holes are still visible.
And hit the sick. I'll hit you.
I'm loving this live betting on DraftKings.
With so many options during the game, it feels like I'm calling the plays. Hi-yo! That's a touchdown! I told you. See, guys, I get the W. You know why? Because I chose right, but not this guy. I work hard and I study film, and I thought it was going here, but it wasn't. Give me the make-believe hat.
Hey, yo.
Who's the king?
Hey, man, watch the game, man.
Who's the fake king?
Watch the
I'm
game.
the king.
New DraftKings customers download the app and turn $5 into $200 instantly in bonus bets. The
People
crown
with
is
us.
yours.
The plan was to build a new party chancellery for the NSDAP leadership, the counterpart to the Reich Chancellor in Berlin, right
he broke.
next to the Führerbau.
He down up here.
Construction for the monstrous administration building commenced in 1938. Atelier Trost, a Munich-based firm of
Down on
architects, had done the design work. But construction was suspended at the beginning of the Second World War, so the Chancellery was never built. The only parts that had been completed were the enormous underground bunkers. Originally, all air raid protection facilities in the party district were connected, so that all the buildings would remain accessible in case of emergency. These shelters were intended to be used exclusively by Nazi functionaries. Only when the Allied bombing attacks on Munich intensified was the party bunker opened to the civilian population. The building that houses the Institute of the city's Technical University was erected on top of the bunker in 1970. In the course of 2007, the underground tunnel system will have to make room for a new building of the College for Television and Film. In 1937, 4 years after the foundation stone was laid, the House of German Arts, another Nazi edifice in Munich, was ceremoniously inaugurated with a procession. From now on, the Day of German Art was to be celebrated here every year. But the war put a stop to these plans. There were only 3 processions in all. When exhibitions opened in the House of German Arts, they were frequently staged as pompous propaganda spectacles. The museum is one of the few representational buildings of the Nazi regime which were actually built in Munich.
Yeah, I think we're in our call.
These celebrations always attracted many Nazi notables to Munich. Adolf Hitler himself attended the Great Exhibition of German Art. In 1939, he was given a guided tour of the exhibition rooms by Gerdi Trost, the widow of the architect. Art that conformed to his regime was to the Führer's taste. Until 1944, the presentation of what the Nazis considered to be art took place annually.
Das festliche Haus der deutschen Kunst birgt auch im 4. Kriegsjahr die Schöpfungen führender deutscher Maler und Bildhauer. Das ganze Volk nimmt mit offenem Herzen Anteil am Kunstschaffen der Gegenwart. Wir erleben das Antlitz deutscher Männer und Frauen. Die gestraffte Figur eines Arbeiters. Neue Quellen des künstlerischen Schaffens erschließt der Krieg.
Oh, shit. Sweet!
Es ergreifen uns zutiefst der beherrschte Schmerz im Gesicht des Verwundeten und die vom eben beendeten Kampf noch aufgewühlten Züge des Soldatenhauptes.
Hitler had been directly involved in the planning for this building too. He even laid down the exact site where it was to be built. At the inauguration, he described the stone-clad museum as the first beautiful building of the new Reich. Art is a sublime mission and an obligation to fanaticism, added the dictator. After the war, a section of the undamaged building was used as an officers' mess by the Americans until 1955. The rest of the building remained a museum. At the same place as the Nazis had staged their notorious show of so-called degenerate art in 1937, visitors could now view works of art that had been banned during the 1,000-year Reich. The Haus der Kunst is still used for exhibitions of all kinds today.
Der Führer besichtigte mit dem italienischen Minister Lantini die neu eröffnete Architektur- und Kunsthandwerksausstellung in München. Die Ausstellung bringt einen Rechenschaftsbericht über die neuen großen Bauten in Deutschland.
In Munich, too, Hitler let his architectural megalomania run wild. The buildings he commissioned for the capital of the movement exceeded all reasonable dimensions. The original model for the restructuring of Munich into the Führer's city has survived the war undamaged. It is exhibited in Munich's Municipal Museum. The planning did not just entail individual buildings. The whole city was to be redesigned. The new face of Munich would symbolically present the city's role as the birthplace of National Socialism.
Geplant war nun
They were planning to erect a grand forum at the end of each Autobahn dedicated to the so-called pillars of the party, the SA, the SS, and the Hitler Youth. So the pillars of the party would literally support the capital of the movement. Starting from these forums, they were going to build wide access roads to the places of historical significance for the party. For example, one would be able to drive directly from a forum to the Bürgerbräukeller.
Great news, Spectrum Internet customers. Now you can try Spectrum Mobile risk-free for a full year at no cost to you. Bring your own device and we'll pay off your phone balance up to $500 per line. Plus, upgrade your phone anytime, as many times as you want when you get Unlimited Plus.
I have a hard time believing that virtual care is real care.
The truth is, it's just as real as in-person care. We carefully listen to your concerns, review your health history, get to know who you are and what you need, and then we figure out how we can help.
Cool. Do you think aliens are real? I knew it. Thank you. Thank you.
Hitler entrusted the implementation of his vision to architect Hermann Giesler. Jochen Wilk was one of the people working in the architect's office at that time.
Giesler was quite close to the Führer, who would frequently summon him for progress reports. Hitler approved of more or less everything that Giesler presented to him, but occasionally there were issues about which Hitler had made up his mind and wouldn't budge, and Giesler had to accept that without question.
The most hideous plans were those for the new central railway station. The original model is currently being restored by experts in Munich's Municipal Museum. It hasn't been on display for many years because of its poor state of preservation.
I shot all the air.
Christian Hale's team is now putting the remaining parts of the model together. The old terminus station was to be replaced by a new gigantic through station further west,
He landed on
featuring a huge dome construction.
What a fucking pussy.
The dome was supposed to cover 20 double tracks, which means the dimensions would have been huge. The first plans provided for a diameter of 245 meters, but it soon became clear that this wouldn't be enough, so it was increased to 265. Based on this figure, a complete plan was then drawn up for the whole station, including static calculations and so on.
Whether the huge dome would have been feasible is highly doubtful. Starting from the new station, a new east-west axis, the so-called Prachtstraße, or Glorious Boulevard, would then lead into the city centre.
Essentially, all this would have been just enormous blocks, relatively undifferentiated. All they were planning to do was line up facades. The functionality of these constructions didn't interest anyone at first, or even at this stage of planning.
The plan was to erect an oversized column of the party at the end of this road, on the site of the old terminus station. Just like the new station's dome, this column is another indication of Hitler's megalomaniac fantasies.
The column was not Giesler's creation. The original design was Speer's. Giesler revised the column several times because he found it too tall and too chunky at the base. But basically, none of us working in Giesler's office were keen on that column. It was never a popular project, the column of the party. Its design was wrong from an urban planning aspect. It was much too big, and it would have ended up being even taller than the towers of the Frauenkirche.
The Nazis planned to display the so-called Blutfahne, or blood flag, from Hitler's 1923 putsch in the base of the column. Just as in other cities of the Reich, the first victims of this urban restructuring were the Jewish citizens. On the 9th of June 1938, 5 months before the Night of Broken Glass, the main Munich synagogue was demolished upon Adolf Hitler's personal orders. The Jewish community was charged with the demolition costs of the building. The authorities claimed traffic-related problems to justify the demolition. In reality, the discrimination of Jewish citizens was well advanced by then. The Aryanization of Jewish companies and businesses had already begun in 1933. For years, Andreas Häusler from Munich City Archives has been investigating the erosion of Jewish citizens' rights in the Bavarian capital. The Jewish community in Munich was quite large. 1,700 Jewish businesses were still registered in the city at the beginning of 1938.
Jewish economic activity was evident in every part of the city. However, one can trace the gradual disappearance of these businesses. I believe it had a lot to do with Munich's reputation as the birthplace of the National Socialist movement. People here were particularly compliant and dedicated when carrying out the wishes of the Nazi leaders.
The city archives contain tens of thousands of files on cases of Aryanization. Nazi bureaucracy meticulously recorded every process and every document. Many citizens shamelessly used the plight of their Jewish neighbors to enrich themselves.
One could say that banishing the Jews from economic life triggered off a kind of gold digger mentality among the population. The Jews were losing their entire possessions, and the other citizens used the opportunity to get hold of these objects at auctions or otherwise.
Bürger sich bei Versteigerungen oder sonstigen Gelegenheiten diese Objekte an Land zu ziehen. Ein besonders interessanter Fall ist das Unternehmen von Heinrich Cohen.
One of the most interesting cases is Heinrich Cohen. He owned a very well-known textile store in Munich, a long-established and financially sound business. After 1933, his business naturally tempted so-called Aryanizers.
Dann auch die Begehrlichkeiten von sogenannten Ariseuren geweckt. Einer, der sich dann erfolgreich...
The person who finally acquired this business was an employee of Frey, a large clothing manufacturer. Because he didn't have enough capital, he was helped by the Frey management and managed to buy Heinrich Cohen's business at a very favorable price.
Natürlich zu einem sehr günstigen Preis. Nach 1945.
After 1945, no one was particularly interested in the pre-war history of the company. The new owner, a certain Stieler, was never questioned on how he had acquired the business or his wealth. On the contrary, he rose to a kind of jet-setter and became part of Munich's in-crowd.
Der sich immer sehr gerne in der schicken Münchner Society bewegt hat.
Munich was not only the city of the party, it was also the city of resistance against the regime. It was here that students of the White Rose Group distributed their leaflets, and carpenter Georg Elser almost succeeded in his assassination attempt on Hitler. On the evening of the 8th of November 1938, a homemade bomb exploded in the Bürgerbräu Keller. For over a month, Elser had been hollowing out a pillar in the hall where Hitler gave his annual memorial speech and stashed the bomb inside.
Attentat auf die traditionelle Führerkundgebung im historischen Bürgerbräu-Keller. Der Führer hatte die Versammlungsstätte kurze Zeit vor der Katastrophe verlassen. Wäre die Kundgebung wie üblich verlaufen, so hätte der Mordplan sein Ziel erreicht. Die Stelle, an der der Führer bei seiner Rede stand, war nach dem Anschlag mit einem 3 Meter hohen Trümmerhaufen bedeckt. 8 Tote und 63 Verletzte forderte dieses gemeine Verbrechen.
Hitler had left the hall much earlier than planned and was on his private train to Berlin when the device went off. The Nazis immediately accused the British of plotting the assassination attempt, and in order to feed the propaganda machinery, 2 British spies were arrested on the following day. the actual perpetrator was already in custody at the time. The border police had arrested him while trying to flee to Switzerland. His ambitious motive had been to liberate Germany from the tyrants. Georg Elser died in the Dachau concentration camp in 1945.
If you
I
love
must.
football, this is the best time of the year.
This is as big as it gets in this game.
Oh my word! Oh, what a shot! What a goal! What a player!
Momentous, iconic, the stuff of absolute dreams.
The victims of the bomb attack were laid out in front of the Feldherrenhalle. Again, the historically charged location at Odeonsplatz served as a backdrop for a celebration of the Nazi cult of the dead. National Socialist propaganda stylized the bomb victims to heroes and martyrs.
Die Opfer des gemeinen Bombenanschlages wurden vor der Feldherrnhalle aufgebahrt. Tag und Nacht defilierte hier die Münchner Bevölkerung in ergriffener Trauer vorbei, um die Toten noch einmal zu grüßen.
Hitler attributed his knack to an act of providence. The pseudo-religious dimension of his regime's rule was now consolidated once and for all. Even prior to this attempt, the dictator had often claimed that fate had chosen him for this task.
Der Führer erwies seinen getreuen Kämpfern die letzte Ehre. Der Stellvertreter des Führers hielt die Traueransprache, in der er von den Opfern dieses grauenhaften Verbrechens Abschied nahm. Ein Wunder habe den Führer vor dem Tode bewahrt, den ruchlose Mörderhand ihm bestimmt hatte. Die Vorsehung, die uns den Führer gesandt hat, werde ihn uns auch für die Zukunft bewahren.
Critical journalist Ruth Andreas Friedrich wrote in her diary during that time, "For Hitler's opponents, it has been clear since 1933 that the Thousand-Year Reich will go to war sooner or later, a war which Germany is bound to lose. We have had 6 years to get used to this idea, but now an end with terror almost seems more bearable than terror without an end." Housing developments were built on the outskirts of Munich for the ordinary folk. This model development in Rammersdorf was based on plans drawn up during the Weimar Republic, which the Nazis then simply adopted. In case of war, the gardens would help the residents to become self-sufficient. These settlement plans for Munich were abandoned in 1935. One of the reasons was the high cost. Also, the Nazis considered such housing projects bourgeois and traditionalist. The Nazis erected entire towns consisting of such developments all over the Reich as part of a gigantic construction project. A propaganda film of the German Labour Front was to make life in a settlement more attractive to the comrades.
Viele Arbeitskameraden haben den Wunsch nach einer eigenen Heimstätte. Diese Heimstättensiedlungen werden vom Reichsheimstättenamt der Deutschen Arbeitsfront entwickelt. Das Reichsheimstättenamt führt sowohl die Planung des Hauses als auch die wirtschaftliche Planung des Gartens durch. Zweckmäßig und schön ist die Einteilung der Wohnräume. Ebenso zweckmäßig und schön die Einrichtungsgegenstände, die vom Reichsheimstättenamt entworfen und mit geringen Mitteln zu beschaffen sind. Heimat auf eigenem Boden. Unser Siedlerpaar sieht sich und seine Familie schon in Gedanken in dieser bis ins Kleinste vom Reichsheimstättenamt wohnlich und behaglich entworfenen Heimstätte.
At Munich's Prinzregentenstraße, an enormous experimental construction project for the residents of the so-called Südstadt or South Town has survived. These satellite towns were planned as independent subsystems within the city. the uniform apartment blocks were given names such as Walgau, Inn, or Alpenland, suggesting coziness in a national community context. The most characteristic feature of these apartment blocks are the above-ground bomb shelters on the corners of the buildings, of which 2 still exist.
This is where the Aryans were supposed to live after the victory, in relatively large, luxurious apartments. These apartment blocks were to be supplemented by huge shelters on the corner of each building, so that residents would have direct access to their designated bunker. The aim here, of course, was to coax the population into accepting a permanent state of mobility for war, even when they were in their homes.
The steel doors of one of the shelters still exist today. Each of these structures would offer protection to 200 people. The access doors from the apartments were walled up after the war. Today, the bunker is used as a storeroom. As of September 1939, the Third Reich was at war. The Nazi regime was quick to organize an entertainment program at home for war invalids and soldiers on leave. In Munich, the diversion of tea and dancing at the Seehaus in the English Garden helped Wehrmacht soldiers to take their minds off the horrors of war.
Big building.
What if she falls?
Run down him fucking twice.
What if he gets really sick? What if this isn't just a freckle?
What if your what ifs weren't so scary? WellPoint Health Insurance. Here for the what ifs of millions of people, and now here for you too, with individual and family health plans that may cost less than you think. WellPoint.
He dead.
Choose Winters.
Notre Dame. Yeah, good luck on the national championship.
For your auto accident. I'm Bill Winters. If you've been injured in an accident,
Hope they win that.
call Winters and Yonkers so we can start working on your case. Call Winters and Yonkers for your free attorney consultation.
When Nazi Germany began to rearm, Munich became an important center for the arms industry. One of the buildings grimly manifesting the increased armament of the Luftwaffe was the headquarters of Air Region Command 4 on Prinzregentenstraße. Today, the building houses Bavaria's Ministry of Economic Affairs. Not all of the relics of the Nazi past were removed after the war. Wehrmacht helmets still crown the window gables, and on a side street you can still see wrought iron railings decorated with swastikas. Although the war was clearly lost by the end of 1943, the Wehrmacht demonstrated its firm belief in final victory during a parade on Munich's Ludwigstrasse.
Motherfucker, I thought I heard 1 minute ago.
The 9th of November, 1943, Hitler was making his annual speech in the Bürgerbräu Keller in memory of the failed Nazi putsch.
In seiner Rede rechnet Adolf Hitler mit den Feinden Deutschlands ab. Deutsches Volk, sei völlig beruhigt. Was auch kommen mag, wir werden es meistern. Am Ende steht der Sieg.
It was one of the dictator's last appearances in Munich. As the armament production in the Third Reich was close to collapse, the Dachau concentration camp near the city was given a new function.
Only reason he got me.
The camp had been built for 5,000 political prisoners in March 1933.
I still don't know how he got me anyways, bro. He fucking missed every one of his shots.
Munitions factory. The party newspaper, Völkischer Beobachter, reported,
"In this camp, all the communist functionaries will be concentrated, and as far as necessary, members of the Social Democratic Militia who endanger the safety of the state."
Wally wally, day day bang bang. Went over here bullying
the capacity limit was soon reached, so the camp had to be extended.
More and more adversaries
Far
of the
south
regime
from where you're at.
came. The old factory buildings had to be torn down, and new huts were constructed to put up a total of 10,000 prisoners. The majority of the people here were political prisoners who'd been deemed antisocial
Get 'em,
elements by the
Schwab,
state and were to be reintegrated into society and forced to renounce their political beliefs.
Before long, many prisoners belonging to oppressed minorities, such as Jews, Sinti and Roma, were also brought here. In the Night of Broken Glass alone, 11,000
the
Jews
gun you're
were
having to use
deported
right
to
there?
Dachau. These pictures, filmed shortly after the liberation of Dachau in May 1945, offer a mere glimpse of the inhuman conditions in the camp. Although Dachau was not an extermination camp, over 40,000 prisoners lost their lives here, not counting the thousands who were deported to the extermination camps.
They say it ain't bad. Say it ain't so.
It was a harsh regime, but this was not the worst, neither the beatings nor the thirst or the hunger. The Jewish prisoners lived in fear of no longer being fit for work, because as soon as the guards found out that you were no longer fit for work, you became a candidate for death.
It was mainly Jews capable of work who were to uphold Germany's battered arms industry during the final years of the war. Extermination through labor. Many prisoners were even transported to Dachau from other extermination camps in order to work for Munich-based armament factories. A dense network of over 400 slave labor camps existed in the Munich metropolitan area alone. Some of them were in the city center.
What a shitty sniper rifle.
It was not widely known that a total of nearly 40 sub-camps of Dachau concentration camp had been set up in Munich. When you look at this map, you can see that they were scattered all over the city, so that everyone must have come face to face with the slave laborers, the prisoners of war, and the camp inmates on an almost daily basis. In the area between Munich and Dachau, several sub-camps were constructed for inmates who worked as slave laborers for BMW. The camp in Allach held over 17,000 prisoners. Max Mannheimer was brought here to the Karlsfeld OT camp at the end of 1944. Of the original compound, only the kitchen section remains today. It is used as a hostel for athletes. Together with the other unskilled camp inmates, Mannheimer had to work outdoors. The trained men assembled aircraft engines in the halls. As you can imagine, the controls were very strict, especially with the people working on the machine tools, because an aircraft engine is very sensitive. If something goes wrong, the plane will crash. Many people were executed for sabotage, although maybe they weren't acting deliberately. There were, however, many inmates who really were sabotaging the work, mainly French and Belgians, I think. There were a lot of French and Belgian inmates in the camp.
Production for the final victory continued until the end. The Americans liberated the camp on the 29th of April. One day later, the end of the Third Reich also dawned on the capital of the movement. Without encountering any resistance, US troops marched into Munich on the 1st of May 1945. 8 days before the unconditional capitulation of Nazi Germany, the American soldiers were welcomed by the population with white flags. Allied bombing raids had severely damaged Munich, and particularly the city center, which had become an expanse of rubble. A major part of the Old Town center was destroyed, but many of the prestigious buildings of the Nazis survived the bombings largely intact. Only the Browner's house, the symbol of the party's tyrannical rule, was totally destroyed. The occupying power later demolished some of the relics and shrines of the party's cult. Nazis disguised their representational buildings from Allied bombers with camouflage nets. And this is why, to this day, Munich cityscape is dotted with buildings from an era which the people in Bavaria's capital would rather forget.
Yeah, your cats are some of the only ones I know. You get under your feet, get stepped on, and get offended. Like, how dare you? Yeah, that's what I just got. Oh, boys, that would be a burger. Exactly. This is an 81 Honda.
We went without a health plan for a long time. Having kids was definitely the game changer.
Dude, when we used to drive to St. Augustine, I turned that shit on my tablet and fucking watched that shit. I watched that shit on the way home.
Healthcare.gov.
Dude, we watched Django on the way
Ready
there.
to avoid talking about salary?
Dada, we got onions, don't we, bub? Bub, I see them. I see them. Fuck yeah, bud. About to say, how else do you fucking eat a hamburger? Get out of here, you fucking scrub.
Seen by many as firm but fair. A government which was restoring the nation's pride and which didn't.
Dada, you need to come get your. Because there are ogres.
Of course, there were signs.
You need to come get your fucking twins in here, bro.
Forbade Jews to marry
Before they get
true
fucking
Aryan Germans
boot kicked across the yard.
their citizenship.
Dada, where's my fillet
When the
knife?
first
Dada, where's my
steps
fillet
came
knife?
to world peace, they didn't come from Hitler at all. But from somewhere else entirely.
You think you're trying to get roundhouse while I'm wearing a pair of these? I'm very glad I found it, son. I was about to come in there and woo!
Japan, at the start of the 20th century, was already a military power.
Oh, you heard me.
It had defeated Russia in a war in 1905, and it had fought
Yeah,
alongside
exactly.
the Allies in
I'm
World
about to
War
come put it on that ass.
After the war, Japan was an acknowledged world power, and it signed up to the League of Nations.
I'll take plastic.
But politically, it was a mess of contradictions. Nominally a democracy, the feudal tradition was still strong. Most Japanese revered their emperor as a living god and regarded him as their true leader. And the country faced major economic problems. Its population was exploding. And it had no natural resources to fuel its rapidly expanding industries. Its
What if
leaders
God
needed
was one
solutions,
of us?
and they saw them in Chinese Manchuria. Manchuria was a land of rich grain fields, with plenty of coal and minerals. It was a perfect target. Japanese troops
So that's where your cats
were
act like
already
they don't fucking
stationed.
get fed.
Other possible targets were the colonies ruled by the European powers.
Yeah, I hear
Burma,
you, buddy.
Malaya and Hong Kong, controlled by Britain. Indochina,
Get
ruled
the
by
fuck
France,
out of here, man.
and the Dutch.
Jumping
East
on a
Indies.
fucking hot eye.
But at this stage, Japan had to be
Can smell them
cautious.
fucking paws
They
burning.
didn't want to rouse the other great power in the Pacific.
No, it was the
United
fucking
States.
little fucking dumb orange one.
For all its
Your twin.
anti-imperialist slogans, the U.S. actually ran an unofficial empire in the Pacific. The
Trying to
Philippines,
brown my hamburger
Guam,
buns real
and
quick.
several islands were under its direct rule.
More than what you do a
It
whole
undoubtedly
fucking
had
dinner.
the strength to take
And
on
it'll take
Japan,
me half the
but since
time.
the end of World War I, it
I'm already
had
almost
other
done.
distractions.
Do we have one that works all day and pays your bills? Yeah. Okay.
This was
I
America's
don't know how
jazz
unfair of him. What do you mean all I do is my schoolwork on a computer
Throughout the
today and you want me to
1920s,
get up
the
and do
nation
something?
concentrated on exploiting its vast resources. It was an economic boom that seemed without end. Fortunes were made both in industry and the stock markets.
Buddy, I used to have to go to a
America
building
seemed
to do my
lost
schoolwork
to
and then
the
come home and still do
increasing
chores.
pursuit of pleasure. With distractions like these, Japan's growing
Yeah, so
pains in the Pacific
shut the
seemed
fuck
very
up.
far away. America had slashed its army after
Okay.
World War I and agreed a naval reduction treaty with Britain, France,
Go live with your
and
Uncle John.
Japan.
See if he lets you do that.
This, in effect, handed naval superiority
Imagine that.
in the Pacific
No, Dede, I got
to the
it.
Japanese. And then came the Great Depression.
When you're done, though, I need you to come wash these dishes for me that I just used.
As the economic devastation spread, a quarter of the population lost their jobs.
Big Papa.
Tens of thousands were made homeless, living in shantytowns.
So why don't you?
Whereas before it had been distracted by pleasure, now America was distracted by pain. It was time for Japan to make her move.
That bowl's actually the only one in here cleaned out. Sure.
In 1931,
Say sorry,
without
Daddy.
even informing their own elected
Being so
government,
disrespectful.
the Japanese forces in Manchuria seized the capital Mukden.
Yeah, and you're a
then
child.
overran the rest of the territory. A puppet state.
Yeah, you should just shut the fuck up and do
was
what you're told.
proclaimed under a puppet ruler. Henry Puyi,
But that would be a
the
fucking
last
shocker.
emperor of China, who had been deposed in 1911, was dragged out of retirement.
Discover
He's
the past
dad
with
here now, John.
exclusive
We all got to
military
answer
history
to Dede.
documentaries and ad-free podcasts presented
Move.
by world-renowned historians, all on History Hit. Watch them on your smart TV or on the go with your mobile device. Download the
Who's
app
mad?
now to watch
Who's
everything
mad?
from the gripping
mad.
story of the
I
Band
don't
of
sense
Brothers
no hostility
to Operation
whatsoever.
Barbarossa and D-Day. Immerse yourself in the dramatic stories of this remarkable era by signing up via the link in the description.
At its headquarters in
All right, boys, who we betting on?
The sports book for every kind of player. Hard Rock Bet. Roll with us.
Geneva, the League of Nations now faced its first great test. Japan was universally condemned. But her response was blunt.
Japan, however,
Move.
find it impossible to accept the report adopted by the Assembly.
The Japanese
we ain't got
then
no
just
ketchup,
walked out,
bro.
and the League suddenly realized there was nothing it could do about Manchuria. Japan was declared an international pariah, but it didn't care. Its leaders had turned their eyes to further conquests in China.
Okay. I'll be back in there in a
These were
minute.
easy pickings. China was in a state of chaos. The government of
Did he
Generalissimo
snipe him?
Chiang Kai-shek was locked in conflict with the Chinese Communist Party under Mao Zedong. There was civil war. In 1936, as a precursor to invasion, the Japanese signed a pact with Hitler. The aim was to guard against any attack by Soviet Russia were it to move on China. Then in July 1937, the Japanese provoked an incident with Chinese troops and invaded. At first, the Chinese were taken by surprise. But they soon fought back fiercely, the communists even joining the Kuomintang in a united front. The Japanese responded with amphibious landings. By the end of 1937, they had overrun much of northern China and the coast. The Japanese fought this war with exceptional brutality, bombing cities indiscriminately. Westerners living in the commercial center, the port of Shanghai, were now evacuated. The city was then besieged for 3 days.
Come on, mama. Come on. Come on, little girl. Callie, I'm sorry I stepped on your foot, mama.
Widespread damage. The Japanese forces showing no pity or concern
like, yeah, well,
for the
fuck
native
you.
population. But it was after the capture of Nanking, then the
Dad, I was
Chinese
just playing
capital,
with you, Bubba.
on December the 17th, 1937, that the
Still love
Japanese
you.
forces
I appreciate
really
everything you do for me around here.
Over 300,000 civilians are estimated to have been massacred during
You
a
don't have to answer
6-week
back to
orgy
accept
of
my
rape
love.
and indiscriminate killing. The Japanese even attacked British and US warships which had been sent to protect their shipping and trade. The worst incident came on December the 12th, 1937. The American gunboat Panay was sunk by Japanese bombers. 50 crewmen died. Despite this, the Western powers refused to intervene. So the League of Nations could do nothing. In the United States, President Roosevelt wanted to impose a naval blockade of Japan.
It has become clear that acts and policies of nations in other parts of the world have far-reaching effects on us.
But the British would have none of it, fearing that it might provoke a war. So all Roosevelt could offer was a $25 million loan to Chiang Kai-shek to buy arms. Even though the communists were now fighting alongside the Kuomintang, the Soviet Union did little to help either. Its only involvement was a series of clashes along its own border with Manchuria. But China itself received nothing. Instead, it had to fight on alone.
That's dope.
During 1938, the Japanese overran Canton and pushed the Chinese forces deeper into the west of the country. All the rhetoric of the League of Nations, all those promises to stop international aggression had come to nothing. And by now, the Western powers were facing aggression much closer to home.
Deve cristallizzare una posizione di potente ingiustizia. Sono i principi che sorgono e che nascono e i principi che declinano. La vittoria è per noi, per i primi.
During the night, this is the city.
Some people just know they can save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, you know, to check your school's saying first before saying it.
High tide.
Let's roll.
Luke here with the Outdoor Boys YouTube channel, and for the next 3 years, me and my family are exploring every island in Hawaii. We're going to be fishing, scuba diving, snorkeling, eating amazing food, meeting wonderful people, and enjoying the most beautiful places on Earth. We're going to the Big Island of Hawaii, Kauai, Maui, Lanai, Molokai, and Oahu. It's taken us 3 years and 9 weeks of filming to make this video, and we know you're going to love it. Well, it's about 9 p.m. local time and super late our time. So we're going to get to bed, and tomorrow morning, I'm going to give you a tour of this place.
Dad, are you joining back? There he is.
Welcome to your first day on the Big Island of Hawaii. I got a little surprise for you.
So what, do you gotta be a...
Oh.
Aloha, Becca.
And I picked this just for you.
I love it. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, sweetie.
We're here near the Kona airport, and we've got this rental house, and it's absolutely gorgeous. There are fruit trees all over. We got pineapples. We got some grapefruit trees. This is a giant banana flower, and look at all these little bananas growing up here. I don't even know what that is. We got papayas. Becca, would you like to sit here and enjoy?
A lot of times too, Dad, if you keep your eyes open, you'll find pretty good little submachine gun stuff.
Look at this. Oh, that smells amazing. Oh, we've got some pog juice,
Oh my goodness.
papaya and yogurt, and a little sweetbread with lily koi jam. Becca, are you having a wonderful morning?
Having a wonderful morning.
Well, shall we get up and actually go out and explore this beautiful island of Hawaii? All right, our first stop is the Kona Coast.
One more
State
kill
Park.
under enemy
Look at all this
UAV.
lava rock, guys.
And then 5 eliminations,
The
a
look
most
and the
wanted
feel of these
contract. I only
islands
need one
changes
more of those,
dramatically,
and
too,
I'll have
depending
my
on which side of
XM4
the
done.
island you go. Most of these islands have a dry, arid side.
I got a few
and then
other
a
guns that are
rainforest
pretty
side,
close,
which is
too.
just drippy green and rains all the time. The Big Island is a lot less crowded and a lot more affordable, but it doesn't have a lot of perfect white sand beaches like Maui or Oahu. We tend to get a lot of these rocky beaches or the coarse sand, but there's also a few black sand beaches here. There's just a lot fewer of them. You see a crab? Well, this is definitely a cool beach, and I think the kids are going to want to come back here, but we're trying to explore and discover a bunch of new places today, so we're going to keep moving. You guys hungry?
Yeah.
Oh.
Coconut?
Some chicken katsu musubi, which is kind of like Hawaiian sushi. Some crispy duck, Kahlua pork. Just right. Macaroni salad and rice is such a Hawaiian thing. It's good. You can't blame them. I mean, it's good stuff.
I like it.
All right, guys, should we go check out another beach?
We bought a video recorder. And that's when I had the first nightmare.
Want to tell me what's on this one? Where did you get those tapes?
You saw what's on them.
In 1938, Adolf Hitler seized what legend said was history's most powerful weapon.
If you hold it, you're invincible.
It was said to be the spear which pierced the side of Christ.
Military leaders became almost besotted with the idea of possessing it.
And with the spear in his grasp, Hitler unleashed terror upon the world. But in the chaos of war, this most valuable of Europe's treasures simply vanished.
This was an emblem of war, twisted by the Nazis to become symbols of the Third Reich.
But one man, Walter Horn, would uncover the mystery of what had happened to the Spear of Destiny. And one of America's finest generals, obsessed with the spear, would launch a mission to find it. In 1933, Adolf Hitler is elected Chancellor of Germany.
Hitler was by no means a normal person to be leading a country in the middle of Europe in the middle of the 20th century, and especially one the size of Germany. He was a very embittered, lonely, twisted, abnormal individual who had an enormous amount of drive and this famous will to power. And that's what really, spurred him on.
He is desperate to be the all-powerful leader of the German people and create a new Germanic empire. The trouble is, he had won less than half of the popular vote.
His grip on power was nothing like as strong as many people think. I mean, after all, most people hadn't voted for Hitler.
The country is divided, and to realize his dreams, he will need to unite it.
Germany was, until just a few years before, in real terms, just a collection of very, very small states. You've got people in, all the way up near the Danish border, and you've got people all the way down near Munich and as far east into what would now be part of Poland. So, how do you unify these people?
Hitler encourages the Germans to look to what he says is their past. He wants to portray himself as a man who will restore Germany to a time when it ruled Europe.
I was toasting that bread.
And he wants to extend its borders to those of the greatest German empire in history.
Come on, baby.
The Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was first created by Charlemagne, Charles the Great, the Germanic king of the Franks in 800 AD. Its purpose? To spread Christianity through all of Europe. For 1,000 years it dominated the continent. At its height, stretching from the North Sea to the Mediterranean, and ruling over what is now Germany and much of Austria, Poland, Italy and France. Now Hitler wanted to create an even greater empire in his own image. The 1,000-year Nazi Reich with himself at its head.
He wasn't the type of person who would like to cut deals and engage in the art of statesmanship or diplomacy. This is a man who just wanted to drive things forward the way he saw the world should be in his eyes.
I'm loving this live betting on DraftKings.
With so many options during the game, it feels like I'm calling the plays. Hi-yo! That's a touchdown! I told you. See, guys, I get the W. You know why? Because I chose right, but not this guy. I work hard and I study film, and I thought it was going here, but it wasn't. Give me the make-believe hat.
Hey, yo.
Who's the king?
Hey, man, watch the game, man.
Who's the fake king?
Watch the
I'm
game.
the king.
New DraftKings customers download the app and turn $5 into $200 instantly in bonus bets. The crown is yours.
But Hitler's difficulty is that there is nothing imperial about him. As the son of a working-class Austrian civil servant, it is not enough to simply proclaim himself the German Führer. He needs to look like one.
He needed to try and assimilate some of the trappings of power and the type of trappings that would be suitable for someone who is ruling a kingdom in the middle of Europe. And of course, what's he going to do? He's going to look back to history to find these things.
He decided that to be an emperor, he would need the possessions of an emperor.
Hitler was looking for an emblem that would underpin his claim to be leading the German people back to a new era.
What do we need? Well, we need various items that are associated with other people in power.
The Holy Roman Emperors had held crown jewels as symbols of their authority. An imperial crown, a scepter, and an orb. But of all these symbols of past German glory, one is more important than all the others. It looks like a simple Roman spearhead. It is the Spear of Destiny. The Spear of Destiny was said to be none other than the spear that had pierced the side of Jesus Christ as he hung on the cross. The myth said that it was wielded by a Roman centurion called Longinus.
As the legend is told, Longinus was a Roman centurion.
Oh, I love
who
Vertigo.
served Pilate faithfully.
I wasn't
He got
bobbing and weaving good
cataracts.
enough.
He was going blind. And Pilate pulled him out of the ranks because he was no longer of service as a fighter, and gave him relative easy duty at Mount Calvary, making sure the crucifixions went off as planned. It didn't require a lot of fighting, didn't require great eyesight.
The Bible says that this centurion, when inspecting the crucified men, was unsure if Jesus had died. So he thrust his spear into Christ's side.
He's a mother flipper.
Blood allegedly dripped down the side of the spear into Longinus's eyes. He was cured of cataracts. He was cured of his blindness. He had a vision of the future. He had a vision of Jesus as the Messiah.
Longinus was converted instantly. As Christianity spreads throughout the world, Longinus's spear, touched by the Son of God, became a revered holy relic. The spear was passed down, first through a succession of Roman emperors, and then to Charlemagne.
Charlemagne carries it into battle, is invincible as long as it's in his hands.
It becomes known as a talisman for conquerors, for military force. It is a military image that it has of vanquishing foes.
Such was its mystique that every Holy Roman Emperor after Charlemagne wanted to possess it. It became a symbol of their authority.
The spear, at a very early point in history, is a reflection of power, of strength.
Broken bow.
Legend says that whoever held the spear would be undefeated in battle.
So not only do you get a sense of whoever has this is the
other
true
one.
world monarch because he has it, but if you hold it, you're invincible.
Give my headshot, bro. Oh my God.
But he didn't have it. In fact, it was in Vienna, the capital of neighboring Austria. When the Holy Roman Empire was dissolved in 1806, its heirs, the Habsburgs, moved the spear to Austria, where it ended up on display
Did that care package down him?
And it was here in 1908 that Adolf Hitler, then a struggling Austrian painter, had first seen the spear and begun to fabricate it.
Yeah, I had to reload.
File the IRS 1099 MISC online to accurately report miscellaneous income and ensure tax compliance. With PDF Filler, you can complete or edit your form, sign it,
It would
and
not
send
let me
it to
hit that
IRS
shot over
online.
that wall, bro.
Save money and time and reduce errors.
I think one of them jumped down, I think, a minute ago. Mm-hmm.
According to one version of the story, Hitler had actually seen the spear in the museum there, and apparently he may have had some sort of moment of epiphany in which he realised that this was an incredibly important object and he had been sort of touched by it. Whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. The point was, it was regarded as being important.
Hitler had long known where it was. And now he was German Führer. All he had to do was take it.
We'll just hit the zip line over here.
March the 12th, 1938, German
Oh
troops
no, I was
crossed
trying to
the
snipe
border
him. You got in my way. Oh, that wasn't your fault. It's all good.
The world watched
All good,
as
all
the
good.
Austrian government collapsed. Hitler was killing two birds with one stone. He was reclaiming lands once held by the Roman Empire, and was now on the brink of seizing the Spear of Destiny.
I think I only got two.
Got to realise that Austria and Germany are, in Hitler's eyes, indivisible, and indeed they should never have been divided in the first place.
Same.
With Austria in his grasp, Hitler now activated the second part of his plan. To seize the spear.
Discover the past with exclusive military history documentaries and ad-free podcasts presented by world-renowned historians, all on History Hit. Watch them on your smart TV or on the go with your mobile device. Download the app now to watch everything, from the gripping story of the Band of Brothers to Operation Barbarossa and D-Day. Immerse yourself in the dramatic stories of this remarkable era by signing up via the link in the description.
As the story is told, as the panzers were driving, across the border into Austria, Hitler had an SS officer in civilian garb already planted in the museum.
Pussy bitch. Oh, shit was sweet taking a little free shot, huh, when I was running across the field.
When he was alerted that the border had been crossed, he changed into his uniform, pulled out his gun, and stood guard over those crown jewels. Nobody was to touch them until Hitler arrived.
Hitler arrived in Vienna just 2 days after the invasion.
One of the very first things he does is to go to the Habsburg Museum, go to the display case where the spear and the crown jewels are, and opens it. And takes possession of the spear.
He took hold of the spear on March the 15th. It was not a date picked by accident.
He took the Spear of Destiny on St. Longinus Day. That's when the centurion, who allegedly carried it at the crucifixion, is honored.
Hitler took the spear to the southern German city of Nuremberg, which had been its home for centuries during the reign of the Holy Roman Emperors.
There was absolutely no question where Hitler was going to take the spear once he absconded with it from Austria. He was going to take it back to Nuremberg, back to its spiritual home, what was to be the spiritual headquarters, the spiritual capital of Nazism, of the 1,000-year Reich.
Taking his lead from the Holy Roman Empire, Hitler had decided to place Nuremberg at the center of his new Nazi Reich.
Berlin is the brain, Nuremberg is the heart.
Here he had built vast parade grounds holding hundreds of thousands of spectators. He staged enormous rallies showcasing German military might. Extravagant displays presented the German people with an image of the future based on his vision of the past.
Oh, I almost had both y'all, motherfucker.
We see newsreels today of the parades going through the streets in Nuremberg, of soldiers dressed as medieval knights. With mock-ups of the chest of the crown jewels. symbolic of being returned to the homeland. The 1,000-year Reich.
I seen you miss that flashbang, did it?
Now's the time to go back in time and shine a light on the
Ain't that shit
family journey
annoying?
that led to you.
What happened, Jay?
Ancestry can help you piece together the past with billions of records, photos, and more. Memberships are on sale now.
Oh, hell yeah.
By displaying the spear and the crown jewels,
Hold on, Daddy.
his message could not have been any clearer.
Ein freies deutsches Volk in einem starken deutschen Reich.
He was the heir to the Holy Roman Emperors.
It was as if King Arthur had finally gotten Excalibur and was marching through town with it. And in a triumphal parade, I got it.
With the Spear of Destiny in his possession, Hitler was convinced he would be unstoppable.
Oh, damn. He was peeking the fucking ladder.
But of course, it didn't turn out that way.
There's a bit.
By the beginning of 1945, 5 years of war has devastated Europe. The spear has failed to bring Hitler the victory he had dreamed of.
What?
His ambitions lie in tatters. His empire on the brink of collapse. And in the chaos, the Spear of Destiny, one of the great treasures of Europe, has disappeared.
No question, Daddy.
But on an American base in Germany, pure luck will allow one man to track it down. Walter Horn is a lieutenant in the US Third Army. His mission? To interrogate German prisoners of war.
There's one up there.
Horn is no ordinary American GI. For one thing, he's German. And 10 years earlier, he had narrowly escaped the clutches of the SS. In the 1930s, Horn was at university in Heidelberg, southwest Germany.
Yeah, he's about to stick his finger in your ass and I shot him for you. You're welcome.
His specialty was the relics of the Holy Roman Empire. He was an art history major who just had the misfortune to get his doctoral degree in 1933, just as Adolf Hitler had come to power.
He looked down at me and whispered out, I was about to stick my finger in his ass.
As a historian, Horn found himself being sucked into
he's
Hitler's
got big
obsession
thumbs.
with proving the superiority of the German race.
Well, can't really tell you all that, but...
He was invited to join a special unit of the SS created specifically for this purpose, the Ahnenerbe. Promising academics were press-ganged into the Ahnenerbe. The job
did
to
he
prove
really
at
sit up
any
there this
cost
whole
that German
time before
culture
he
was
gave up?
superior to every culture in the world. And who better for the Ahnenerbe to recruit than the impressive young academic and PhD,
Some people
Walter
feel like a nut,
Horn.
some people don't.
Walter was perfect Nazi material. He had been a javelin contender for the Olympics.
Dude, I don't
He
think I've
came
ever seen
from
anybody travel around this map
fifth-generation
much you just
Germanic Aryan stock. You know, he was young, he was good-looking, he was well-traveled. This
Everywhere.
was the kind of man the Nazis were looking for.
But Horn could see exactly where Nazi control of German academic life was leading.
The Ahnenerbe can't just be seen as a kind of harmless bunch of corrupted academics who were just sucking up to the Nazis, because what they were proving was helping to create a worldview that was in essence evil. And some of these theories are directly related to the idea of race, and we all know what happens when you apply these theories to a regime that is as murderous as the Nazis are. It leads directly to the gates of Auschwitz.
Horn wanted no part of it. So in 1934, he decided to flee Germany.
He didn't want to give up his homeland, but he saw no option around it. One thing he knew is he had to get out of Germany. You know, the storm is coming down. This is no place to be.
But as he began his flight to freedom, Horn learned that the SS were after him.
Bring on the new year with Pep Boys. Trust Pep Boys to keep you rolling with quality service for every mile. From oil changes and battery replacements to brakes, Pep Boys has the pros you can trust to keep your ride ready for the road ahead. Make an appointment with Pep Boys today and don't miss your chance to save big.
He was very concerned. He hated the Nazis. He didn't know if it was because of remarks that he had made about the Nazis.
To his horror, one SS officer had managed to track him down.
The SS officer had his pistol, and I'm sure Walter was thinking that the end had come.
But Horn was in for yet another surprise.